Okay, are we on? Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Okay. I'm Bill Mitsch and I work here, but I'm giving a lightning talk, so I can't say anything more. I gave it in Estonia and I gave it pretty quickly, in fact, too quickly. But all those subjects are in my talk. Some of them just one slide, some of them a little more belabored. But before I give my regular talk, I added 2 slides. I am so angry. And I'm going to show you what I wrote, and I sent it off to the New York Times. I sent what I'm going to show you in a minute off to the New York Times, what was it, last night, but this appeared 2 nights ago, so that's pretty quick. And I hope to get a quick answer from them of whether they'll publish what I'm going to show you. But this is absolutely a disaster. This is what I said. This is the darkest day. Do I have I guess I'll twist this way. This is the darkest day for federal protection of wetlands since it first started 45 years ago. There's a horrible setback for wetland protection in the USA. I have followed the tug of war for all these years between those who appreciate the many ecosystem services that wetlands provide, including cleaning our waters, they're nature's kidneys, sequestering and permanently storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and providing the best habitat for hundreds of threatened and endangered species. And that tug of war is with the industrial scale, agriculture, energy, and real estate giants. It has always been David versus Goliath. And when I wrote this at 3 a.m. the other night, I had to wake up my wife to ask her how to spell Goliath. She's pretty angry at me. I am calling for those of us who appreciate the good things that nature has provided for us, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, and speak out soon and often about the rape of the landscape. I'm using some harsh words that will surely follow this action. We've already lost 50% of the wetlands in the lower 48 states of this country, and this makes all the rest of them vulnerable to drainage and destruction, or more likely, death of 1,000 cuts. I especially call upon those who are in business world. Come on, business world is needed now to help establish environmental bonds, local and state ordinances, and novel approaches to saving our remaining wetlands. I also call upon the children and young adults who are much more knowledgeable about wetlands and water resources than their parents or grandparents, to join the silent majority, and I think it's a majority, who appreciate the role of wetlands to move forward, with or without our federal government, to help save our planet. The pending landscape destruction is easily as threatening to our livelihood as is climate change, perhaps more so. Get angry, my friends, and then go to action. That's my... Now, I sent it off to the New York Times with a letter, and if they don't publish it, I don't know, somebody from Naples paper here or something. All right, and then this is sort of where that troubled water thing came from. This was a movie we actually showed down in my lab, and will be shown nationally on every PBS station, I'm told, 2 days before Earth Day. So they are making it the Earth Day movie. And WLRN out of Fort Lauderdale, Miami, who has put it together. So we ran it on January 8th down in my lab. I have a copy of it, but I'm really supposed to be careful and not show it. But I am going to show you if I can get up to that. How do I get control of that button up on the top?
Good question.
No? That's a pointer. Yeah, you can help me. Yes. And then click the full scale and the, yeah, click left and right.
Try it. Hey.
Click the full scale one right there.
Clicking.
Most of the sea turtles that we see here are here because of human impact related issues.
The last 3 years, in fact, have been the hottest on record.
Too hot is really bad. It is because it's too hot.
We no longer have any males to help with the reproduction of the species.
All of a sudden, turtles started to show up with maybe 1 or 2 little
He's our star.
Plastic and dot.
What we see happen to these turtles, we're eventually gonna see happen to all life.
I don't know who that is.
followed the environment for many, many years, and I think I've never seen anything quite as bad as what's going on now.
These animals that tug at your heartstrings, and these linguistic sea creatures really die off in these massive droves like this.
It's truly apocalyptic, and it's happening before our eyes.
We only have one home, one planet. There is no planet B.
Sure. All right, well, that's the introduction. That's sort of the beginning of the trailer that you can find that trailer online. But it is an amazing movie, and people have said this is Rachel Carson again. This is the Silent Springs replay with a cinematic presentation rather than a book. It's that powerful, and people are really amazed by it. So, and it's more than sea turtle. You got to take the sea turtle as the, you know, the attractive large animal that you have to have, but it's all about us. It's about the oceans going bad. And my God, if that happens, we're all in trouble. So, I just wanted to show that to, now we can move on. First of all, I show this graph with the world view of where the harmful algal blooms are, and I think I'm off by an order of magnitude, but originally a couple years ago they said there were 750 massive algal blooms in the world, and I think it's 7,500 if we start. I don't know who's counting, but I've seen a lot of maps of the United States having that many harmful algal blooms, and that includes hypoxia and other terms like red tide and blue-green algal blooms and so on. It's massive. It's massive along our coastlines. It's massive in inland systems as well. Well, restoring the Florida Everglades is really the keystone to everything we do down here. And this is a graphic that's showing what we're doing now, which is wasting gigantic amounts of fresh water to the two coasts. Fresh water, good. Well, it's polluted fresh water, but it's fresh water nevertheless. And of course, everybody knows about that because it's trashing our beaches and our estuaries down here in Fort Myers, but also on the East Coast with St. Lucie. This is what we want. We want the water to go south. Everybody, that's the mantra of the restoration, send the water south. I agree with that. Everybody agrees with it. It just better not be dirty water. And that's what's concerning me with what they're doing now. I'll come to that in a minute. Okay, well, this is 2016, which everybody was here. This happened in early February 2016. Usually these discharges happen in August, but they just happened because we had a rainy January. We had unseasonal amount of precipitation, that's 30 centimeters or 12 inches of rain in January. And the Army Corps they were shocked, and it filled up Lake Okeechobee. And it's thought to be caused by El Nino. So when you hear about El Nino year, we maybe better keep an eye on the Lake Okeechobee a little bit more. Approximately 3 billion cubic meters. If you don't know what a cubic meter is, cubic yard works just fine. 3 billion cubic meters of polluted Lake Okeechobee water was sent down the Caloosahatchee River to the Gulf right here, and down the St. Lucie Canal to the Atlantic Ocean in 2016, severely polluting both estuaries, both visually polluting but actually polluting. And the pumping of the water to these outlets was deemed necessary because of the high and unsafe Lake Okeechobee water levels, which in turn were due to the high rainfall events in January 2016. Can somebody move this thing so it doesn't block my... Okay, a few months later in 2016, the governor of Florida, you guys remember who he was, declared an emergency on both Florida coastlines concerning guacamole-thick blue-green algae blooms just upstream of both coastlines. I've not eaten guacamole ever since. I've sworn off it. And then 2018 was even worse, and this time we were prepared. I was up in Ohio, as I am every summer, and I started hearing the news about the red tide on the coast down here, and I called my lab and said, "Are we doing anything?" No, we're going to. I'm coming down in 2 days. Let's find a boat, and we're out there. So we found 2 different boats, one from FGCU, and the next time the Captains for Clean Water. Anybody here from the Captains? No? Well, they were very gracious in providing the boat, and they knew where the red tide was. So we're out there sampling. So that's what red tide water looked like. That was 2 miles off the coast of Fort Myers Beach. And it was on August 9th, I believe. And dead fish were everywhere. It was just, and we could hardly even take the samples. You can probably see my eyes are bleeding almost. It was really rough out there. You can sort of see where it ends, can't you? If you look at the water, you can see blue water on the very edge. So it's very clear when you're out in the middle of the red tide. And we sampled, over those 2 days, we went as much as 20 miles offshore, and then we came in, and then the next day we went more on the north to south G4, 5, 6, and 7 sites. And you can see we categorize each of those according to the count, the algal counts, as being low to high and in between. So that's the algal counts. But what we were doing was a stable isotope study, and when our media people told CNN that we were finding the smoking gun, I don't know what language they used, but it didn't matter. They were down there lickety-split. So they were on one of those 2 boat trips. And that video that they took on that boat trip was what they showed that night nationwide on CNN and showed what a horrible situation is down in Florida. And they probably cut our income from tourists in half for that one show. But we took samples, and the idea we originally had was, well, look, we're already doing stable isotopes in Lake Okeechobee. We were already doing that. We wanted to see if the signal we got in Lake Okeechobee matched those samples you saw me holding from the middle of the... Now, one of the problems we had is the red tide algae are pretty clever. They hide the evidence. If there's nitrate in that water, it was very hard to find nitrate in the water because they gobbled it all up. We need nitrate in organic form, and the red algae had it in their gut. So, but we found a couple samples that there was actually enough trace amounts of nitrates that the California lab could give us a stable isotope signal of oxygen and nitrogen. And this graph was developed many years ago by some people that said, let's put your nitrogen isotope and your oxygen isotope on this graph and see, and it will tell you where the source is, okay? So here it is. Gulf of Mexico red tide. You see it up in the upper left. So it's right smack dab in the nitrate fertilizer box, ladies and gentlemen. So unless somebody has proven that it's not, we have scientific evidence, albeit limited samples, that that's what's fueling the red tide in 2018. Are we going to publish this? We're going to try, but we're going to run into a troublesome thing because we don't have that many samples. But given that, and you see where the Gulf of Mexico no red tide, the signal, that was offshore. The signal is decidedly different, and it's under marine nitrate. In other words, it's fed by the nitrate coming from the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Totally different source. We also, let me see if this works. So that was one thing, that you go from a marine nitrate dominated thing to one that's dominated by fertilizer. And I'm sorry, Mother Nature doesn't manufacture fertilizer. We do. And it's got a distinct signal. Then we said, well, our original thought was, well, maybe the Lake Okeechobee signal and maybe the Caloosahatchee signals would match what we were measuring. No, they weren't. So that was the smoking gun thing that the CNN people wanted. They wanted us to definitively show, oh, that water's coming from Lake Okeechobee and sugar did it, blah, blah, blah. And so we didn't prove that at all. In fact, we suggested the water was coming from a whole multiple, all sorts of sources by the time it gets down to the seacoast. But again, that's a minor finding, but I think especially identifying the source being nitrate fertilizer and not being ammonium fertilizer, not being manure and septic waste, not being atmosphere, and not being marine nitrate, that is gigantic, albeit with a limited sample. I mean, it's not like you can write a grant proposal to study red tide. Red tide comes when it wants to come, not when your budget is ready for it. So it's very hard to catch any data in red tide, to be honest. So basically, after those 2 years, 2016 and 18, this cute cartoon came out somewhere in that period. I think it came out in the Naples paper. No, the journal. I don't know what it is. But anyhow, look, George, you can see the corrupt and immoral environmental policies from here, and it shows algae oozing out into the Gulf of Mexico from South Florida. And that's about what the situation is, and still is today. but it's a lot better. But in 2017, and I have to give credit to the administration that was in place at that time, 2017, they at least came up with a plan. It was called the EAA Reservoir Proposal. I was asked to review it formally by the Friends of the Everglades, which was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas's NGO. So I was honored to review it for him. And here's where that main reservoir is going to be, perhaps 30 miles south of Lake Okeechobee. And here's the story. The flow from Lake Okeechobee will increase by 76%, from 259 to 459 million cubic meters. If you want cubic yards, that's okay, per year. That's a lot of water, and that's a big increase in water. A 10,100 acre reservoir, 23 feet deep, will be built for water storage. Sheer sides, it will drain to zero and then fill up seasonally. It will be like a gigantic, gigantic swimming pool. Instead of the edges being concrete, it'll be limestone. And you guys all know what limestone looks like. It's got pores and holes and all sorts of stuff. I don't know how they're going to seal all that. But, okay, so first of all, there's some questions of whether that reservoir will be able to just stay intact, not leak, and so on. 23 feet deep. There is no such thing in the Everglades. So that's not restoration. And I'm sorry. I think the American public thinks they're paying for restoration, not swimming pools. But here's the real problem. They decided that they could deal with this problem with adding only 6,550 acres of treatment wetlands to clean the water. The reservoir will not clean the water. They claim it will. It will not. Guess what the water quality of the reservoir is going to be? This is a quiz. They're dumping Lake Okeechobee water in. It'll be the same as Lake Okeechobee. It'll just look like a swimming pool, but it'll be the same. Right? What else could it be? What? Worse, probably. So only a 13% in wetlands, and I say we need 50,000 to 100,000 acres from some of our calculations. 100,000 is with a good, good engineers always have a safety factor of 2, so 50,000 is what we calculate, so let's just find 100,000 acres to be sure, because we don't want to miss this one. And as designed, this EA reservoir project that will cost US $2 billion or more, I'm sure it's going to skyrocket in cost, will likely deliver phosphorus contaminated water to the Florida Everglades. That's my prediction. That's what I told the Friends of the Everglades. And then I published it. I did a report. Nobody ever sees reports. It was sent to the Army Corps. They didn't look at it. So I said, I'm going to publish that. And peer review published. And I published it in August, and we got tons of stories all around the state. Every newspaper in the state ran a story, something like that. Expert says EA reservoir won't work. So there was all this explosion of articles, and then everything went stone quiet. Can you guys appreciate why? We're talking about $2.2 billion raining on Florida. They don't want some professor ruining their parade. And I don't know who they is. They is everybody. It's the state legislature, it's the governor, it's everybody. But especially, well, I won't go into who it is. But it's not going to work. Or at least I'm saying probably won't work. I'll put the word probably in there. But, so we need to go back to the drawing board, and they're refusing to do that. That's what shocks me. Bill, we don't have time to look at any more detail. We're moving ahead. Okay. And then even here, wetland scientist questions design of EAA. I actually sort of did a, what do you call it, a debate with the South Florida Water Management District, who is doing this project. But the debate was kind of funny because I was in, where was I? I was in Korea at the time. And, it was 3 in the morning there or something. And, the guy from the South Florida Water Management District wasn't going to get up at 3 a.m. So he was interviewed separately. So it's not really a debate, but you can go to this webpage on WGCU and hear me and what I think, and you can hear him. And understand how they're defending this project, I guess is what I'm saying. All right, well, let me say some nice things about the district, because they did do some extraordinarily good things. Back when in the sugar days, when they were dealing with the problem of runoff from sugar going into the Everglades, they decided they were going to help poor little sugar out, and we built 57,000 acres of treatment wetlands. 57, that's nobody in the world that's built that many wetlands to clean water. And what's extraordinary is they work. And they're working spectacularly right now. I'll give you, and by the way, that's what they look like. Looks like a wetland to you, right? Oh, no, no. The lawyers of the South Florida Water Management District, originally, I don't think they're as draconian now, but they said, oh, no, no, you can't call them wetlands. You have to call them STAs, stormwater treatment areas. I said they're wetlands. So anyhow, when I publish work on it, I call them wetlands and get in trouble. But their employees are not allowed to call them wetlands. So this is what they look like. They sure look like wetlands to me. The water quality is incredible coming out of them. I put the last 3 data sets on the bottom. These are all in parts per billion. This is low nutrients to begin with. But we're going from about 100, 150 parts per billion down to, what, 15 to 20 parts per billion in the outflow of these things. They are working very well. I'm very proud of my state for doing this. I brag about them to the rest of the world, that we know how to do wetlands on a big, big scale. So when people say, you can't do these on a big scale and it'll never work, baloney, of course you can. So, but here's the rub that's still there. The federal government, in their infinite wisdom, which they always have, has decided that they want it to be 10 parts per billion. And I have no problem with that. It's easy to remember. If it's 15, you know, I don't remember that, but 10, no problem. So all of our experiments that we did require you get down to 10, or we were seeking to get 10. And we did hit 10 once, and I thought they would have a parade for me in West Palm Beach. And instead, I got like a fierce backlash, and they canceled my contract. I mean, I'm sorry, but that was in the draconian days of the last governor, and I think things are a lot better now at the district. So let me jump to my last subject, and I hope I have time and not run out. This is wetlaculture. This is what we're doing now. This is what we think will save the planet, or at least the agricultural landscape. Wetlaculture is basically a combination of wetlands plus agriculture. That's where that word comes from. Sustainable agriculture with wetlands. And I'll try to explain it real quickly. The top graph shows what we're doing now. It's basically a one-way trip. We produce fertilizers, manufacture them, sell them to agriculture, sell them to urban users, sell them to everybody, but we'll call it mostly agriculture here. Agriculture, of course, sends the food to the human economy, which has the nutrients in it, but it also sends a lot of stormwater, that's what we're talking about, straight to the lakes, rivers, and estuaries. Then the human economy, of course, has wastewater, and even when we treat it, and especially when we treat it, it's just basically nutrient water. Secondary treatment, that's normal, what normal cities do, is just basically nutrient soup. They've taken out the organic matter, but they, in many cases, have not taken out the nutrients. That's a story for another lecture. So here's what we're doing with the wetlaculture idea. We're going to build some wetlands in and among the agricultural fields. Be a 50-50 landscape or something like that. I mean, the details still have to be worked out. And we let the runoff from the agriculture go to this wetland rather than go downstream. The wetland, in turn, we have this idea that we got to recycle to agriculture. Now, I'm not going to show you how we do that, but it's so simple, it's crazy. I can't even patent it. And by doing that recycling, we cut off the opiate, or at least minimize new fertilizer putting on land, which is that's what they do now. New fertilizer every year, new fertilizer every year, and most of it goes off the system because it's saturated. So we've got 3 experiments going. We call them mesocosm experiments because they're small scale. 2 in Ohio and 1 down here. Now you say, well, wait a minute, aren't you a professor in Florida? I said, yeah, but for me to get 1 site in Florida with all the politics is about equal to 10 up in Ohio. Ohio was easy. I said, could I put some experiment on your land? They said, sure. End of discussion. Down here, it's 2 years of negotiation. But I did get one built in Naples at the I'll show you a picture of it. No, I don't have a picture of it, but this is what they look like, 28 tubs in the ground, each one of those representing a little wetland, and we apply water in them, and we have graduate students measuring the concentration, and we got some extraordinary numbers. I'm sorry I didn't have time to even put the numbers that we recently got, and they're extraordinary. We're taking 60 to 80% of the nutrients out of the water. It doesn't come out the outflow. It stays in the little tub, and in the if it's a big wetland, it would stay in the wetland. So they're working very well. This one's at Buckeye Lake, and there's one at close to Lake Erie in the former Great Black Swamp, and then the third one is down here in Naples at Freedom Park, if any of you know where that is.
Doctor, I've never had occasion to ask an eminent scholar to wrap it up before.
Yeah, well,
But I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask that.
I'll wrap it up. But what's unique about our thing is we're not shy about working on a business model. And you see that word farmer down at the bottom? See all those arrows going into the farmer? Farmers, we're going to pay the farmers. They're going to get paid to produce clean water instead of clean corn, or clean sugar, I guess. And what's wrong with that? We need clean water almost more than we need sugar. We don't know where the sugar is going anyhow. It's getting great play up in Ohio, less publicity down here for some reason. But up in Ohio, the Toledo Blade just loves this story. And especially when we had a workshop last August up there where we said, we've got a business model. We're talking to business people. We're not talking to government people. We're talking to business people. And we think it's very viable. Okay, real quickly, our Moonlight on the Marsh lecture series. We had the first one 2 nights ago by Siobhan Fennessy. And if you guys don't know about this, you should know about it. It's a very important lecture series, and it's the #1 environmental event of the season in Naples. There's nobody competing with us. There will be, but right now we're #1. And we have a February 6th lecture on carbon by Kurt Richardson from Duke University. Some of you know him by reputation. But February 20th, 21st, we're doing a unique thing. We're doing a workshop where we're going to showcase wetlaculture. And it takes us 2 days to do that. And let me see if, oh, there we go. This is the formal poster we have, and we'll be coming out very soon with a booklet that we can mail around to people. But the details about the date are very clear. It's the evenings of February 20th and 21st, and you have to go online to register, because this one we have to charge for. The other talks are free because we have a donor, Bernie Master, who pays for them. But this one is a little more complicated and detailed. So it's a $30 charge for the total for the 2 days. And it's going to be at the Kapnick Center down in Naples. And you can find it. We used to have a nice email, fgcu.edu/swamp. Now, heaven knows, they changed our address and nobody can figure out how to go to. Just type Everglades Wetland Research Park on the Google and you'll find us. Okay. All right, now this is kind of interesting because you are the first people ever, except for my advisory committee yesterday. What's today, Saturday? Yeah, yesterday. I unveiled to them our plan for the next 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, of what we're seeking donations for. And there are 4 things. Graduate student stipends, that's the heart and soul of what we do down in Naples. And we are mostly a graduate student program because the undergraduates just can't be down there. It's 30 miles away. So it's the graduate student stipends. Continuing those experiments that I just told you about, the wetland culture, they are 10-year experiments. So I'm asking for funding at least years 4 through 8. Wetland and Water Quality Center building. I know you're going to hook me. And then 2 full-scale wetland acres on the size of 100 acres. There's my conclusions. You can read them. Thank you.